How does it feel sitting here right now and just thinking about you've come 15 years in this vision?
I have been working and running an organisation since I was 19 years old. So sometimes I'm like, God, I love how passionate I am and how much of a gift I feel this vision is.
It's easy when you sit on a set like this and we're speaking with these women and you're just like, this is worth it, or you hear a story. But the reality is it can be weeks of hard work, months of difficult times where it feels like really dry.
I can't find the words, but how grateful I am that you were obedient, that you had the courage, the faith to do that.
I took a leap of faith and quit my job I was getting married in a year, or 8 months, had no job, Magnify had no funding. But I was just at the point where I was like, God, just something needs to break.
Like, this is so much more than a professional organisation. We're not climbing over each other's heads. Like, this is a community.
My heart has always been for women who would probably not call themselves Christians, who are on a journey wanting to explore. Welcome to the Magnify Conversations. My name's Ruth, and I'm the founder and CEO of Magnify.
And my name's Rachel, and I'm one of the hosts of this show.
Magnify is a global community and content platform focused on equipping women like you to grow in and impact your sphere of influence. We truly want to see you thrive in all areas of life and want to display what faith can look like at the centre of that too.
We started the conversations because we wanted to have real discussions about the things that matter. Money, relationships, and work, all through the lens of faith and our relationship with God.
Ultimately, we know as multifaceted women, things are rarely one size fits all. So we speak with many different women who are from our community and hear their stories. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Magnify Conversations.
Today, we sat down with our very own founder, Ruth, to chat about the inspiring story behind Magnify and how she's built a thriving platform and community for 15 years.
Ruth is the founder and CEO of Magnify, our platform and community that helps women across the globe explore and grow their faith in every area of life.
There's no doubt that it's exciting but scary when you get a God-sized dream, but it's another thing when you're learning that through that entire growth journey, you still have to trust in God. We're so grateful to have spoken to Ruth about what shapes this platform and community.
Let's get into this conversation.
Well, we're so honoured to have none other than Ruth, our founder and CEO of Magnify, join us today for the conversations.
We can't wait for this one.
Welcome, Ruth.
Thank you, ladies. Nice to be on the other side.
Great to have you here.
On the other side. Okay, so before we get into the story, the 15-year story of Magnify, we're going to do some icebreakers with you, Ruth, okay? So, one has to go. Brunch or girls' night?
Girls' night.
Yeah,
I can't stay awake past 8.
Rachel, what about you?
Brunch would probably go for me. I'm more fun in the evenings.
Really?
Yeah. I couldn't do it every week, right? Okay, brunch is more acceptable for me every week because I'm awake more in the day. I get that. No, I'm more fun in the evening.
Okay.
I just love food though as well.
Yeah, I love a brunch.
Yeah, but
I
can
love
girls'
eggs.
night be eating and then going out for a drink? No.
Food is not the centre.
Yeah. Okay, I've got another one. If you could only wear one or the other for the rest of your life, are you picking independent brands? I think I know what Ruth's going to say. Or older and established luxury brands?
Oh, I would say an answer that's not there is luxury brands. They don't necessarily have to be older, but I just love the craftsmanship. But I do also feel like a lot of independent brands nowadays, the craftsmanship is incredible. Obviously, the backstory is I used to work for Burberry. So yeah, I'd make up a third choice, which would be luxury brands.
Brand. Rachel, what about you?
I don't know. I agree with Ruth. I was going to say, when I saw the icebreaker, I was like, oh, it's a really hard one. But there are so many good independent brands doing things well now.
Like today.
So, exactly. So potentially that's the answer too. What about you, Sinead, though?
Oof, don't ask me. Because the independent brands have prices now that luxury brands have because they put so much into what they do. Oof, I'm going to go with luxury brands.
Yeah.
I love a timeless House of Chanel. I love that. So, yeah, I'm going to go with luxury. Can I do one more? Okay, so one has to go. Which one are you choosing? Stylish bags or stylish shoes?
Shoes. No,
That's one has to go.
Bags has to go.
Okay, bags has to go.
Ooh.
I don't know.
I think I'll get rid of shoes.
Yeah,
Really?
I actually think
with
I
your
would.
shoe collection.
I walk barefoot with a Louis Vuitton suitcase.
I think if I think about, I love shoes, but I think bags excite me more. So I'd have to get rid of shoes.
I think if I had your shoe collection, then I would rethink
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
Maybe we've just not been opened up to the real world of
Yeah.
shoes.
I think you have to share that story about your passion for shoes as well, because I think that ties into this story that we're going to hear more about, Magnify. And to be honest, we wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for the vision that God gave you more than 15 years ago. For you, how does it feel to sit here 15 years? These days, things don't last for more than 5 minutes. So how does it feel sitting here right now and just thinking about you've come 15 years in this vision?
Oh, so many feelings. I think the first thing is I don't feel like I've been doing this for 15 years. Like I always say to all of you guys that I literally feel we're like 1% into the vision. So in a way that excites me, like how much has been done in 15 years. But then I literally feel like we're literally just like touching the surface of the impact I would love us to have. I think I also just feel really grateful. Grateful for, like I've told my story before, but like losing family members, losing my faith. And at that time, I never ever thought like I would find joy or find purpose or be passionate about something. And I think anyone who meets me, those are probably 3 words you would use to describe like how I am, particularly with Magnify. But also grateful that God has allowed me to have my passion and my work intertwined. So sometimes that can often feel like a burden as well. But I think that every day, like even in creating like the conversations, there's always like new aspects of Magnify to develop. I just sometimes feel like I can't believe I get to do this. And then honestly speaking, because this is a real conversation, there are times where I feel absolutely exhausted. And I was saying it to my husband the other day that I started this when I was 19. So, you know, normally people who are 19 don't necessarily have loads of responsibilities. Particularly at uni, you've got free time, you're waking up at 3 PM, having summer holidays. And so there is an aspect of me that also feels I have been working and running an organisation since I was 19 years old. So sometimes I'm like, God, I love how passionate I am and how much of a gift I feel this vision is. But then kind of mentally always thinking about keeping things going, even though I know it's God's vision, like the fact that I've been entrusted with it, that also sometimes feels taxing. And I feel that's the aspect of like being a founder that people don't always talk about. And then I think it's like, I feel burdened, but in a good way. So the other day I was just like weeping in the kitchen and my husband was like, is everything okay? And I was like, women are just so strong. They just go through so much. And I think particularly during Magnify, where you're always hearing like so many women's like incredible testimonies and what they've had to go through, you're just like, women go through a lot. And so that sense of, feeling the emotional thing of like what women go through, but also the desire for women to know Christ. I know it's not me who will ultimately do that, but I do feel such like a heavy weight of responsibility in that. So that's a mixed answer.
There's obviously incredible things with this vision. There's amazing stories that you obviously know them all. We know some of them. We meet some incredible women in this community. It's really beautiful, and it's just the beginning. But with any good thing, there are challenges. And when you're in the trenches as a founder, as somebody who's really bearing the weight and the burden of this vision, when it's really tough, how do you remind yourself of why you're doing what you're doing? Because it's easy when you sit on a set like this and we're speaking with these women and you're just like, this is worth it, or you hear a story. But the reality is it can be weeks of hard work, months of difficult times where it feels like really dry.
Years.
Years. And you've maybe not seen some of the things you felt God shown you as well. How do you handle those challenges and how do you encourage yourself in those times?
In a way, I feel like God is the one that will always bring people into my life to encourage me. So I remember a time a few years ago where I was just like, I've got to go and get a job now and do something else, and bumped into a lady, and the story she told, we had literally just interviewed someone who had like navigated that awful situation and come out of the other side. And I was just like, do you mind if I like have your contact details to send you this? And times like that, I just feel so privileged that this vision exists. I say that even if I wasn't running it. So yeah, I feel like God always brings people to encourage me in that time, because I've always held it lightly and said to God that if for any reason you wanted me to not do it or do something else, I've always held the vision in that way, not like I've got to do this and my identity is in that. So yeah, I feel like God reminds me of why I'm doing this in the moments where I literally feel like I can't carry on. And I remember a few years ago actually speaking to an executive coach, and I was like, I just find this so hard. And she asked me, okay, so if you could stop doing it tomorrow, would you? And I was like, no. And she was like, okay, well, that's your answer, is that you don't want to give this up. You just don't want it to be that hard. And I think for me, learning to be resilient so often, I find really challenging. But I also know there's like the flip side of not many things worth doing will be easy. And ultimately, the impact of women's lives, I cannot necessarily see that on this side of earth. But I just know it's there. So, yeah.
Yeah. I just want to pick up on how you said that you wouldn't give it up, even though it was so hard. And the word hard in this society these days, people don't want such great things to be so difficult. And you said that you have sent, encouragements that we've had on the podcast to other women. What would be a time of hardship that you would share, you want to share with, the community, that you would send to someone right now who's going through a hard time with their vision, with something that they sense God is calling them to do? What would be a story that you would tell them, or something you would send to them, that this was hard for me, but I pushed through it?
So it sounds funny now, but actually it's rooted in something quite serious. So I think sometimes it's easy to compare ourselves to others. So in my mid-20s, most of my friends were working in corporate, doing well, saving for their first house or buying their first house. And I remember I had just started dating my husband at the time. And so he would always be like, oh, what do you do? Like, obviously, when we started, what do you do for work? I was like, oh, I do Magnify. I just didn't explain that I volunteer full-time for Magnify. And so when I went to meet him after work, he was like, oh, babe, like, can you see like the soles of your shoe are like coming apart? And obviously, when you volunteer for free, you don't really have money to be buying shoes. And I remember like also seeing a school friend on the way, and I just thought, it just was like this mirror moment of thinking, this is what my life should be like in terms of working the city, going to a job, covering the soles of my feet. And here I am. And I remember just thinking, like, this just doesn't make sense. Like, I need to be more serious and go and get a job. Got a job. I did it for like a year, and I was just like, I cannot do this. And I also can't put this vision down. And so I took a leap of faith and quit my job I was getting married in a year, 8 months, had no job, Magnify had no funding. But I was just at the point where I was like, God, just something needs to break. It's either going to break to the point where I'm going to give it up, or it's going to shift. And that was the year we then got funding to actually enable Magnify to go to the next level, to have a staff team for the first time, to have our office. And I always look back on that when it feels hard, and remembering that partly what was so great about that time was I was like, God, I'm fully surrendered to you. So I'm not even saying that this vision has to work. I'm just saying your will be done. If it was that Magnify was supposed to be for 8 years, and then I was supposed to do something else. So yeah, that was just a really difficult time. And I think like when I joke about my relationship with shoes now, it's also to me a thing of like God seeing even like the little desires and the sacrifices that no one would have known. Like, I've always loved fashion, but to literally be in a position where your soul is separated from the shoe because you're so passionate about this vision. It was, just a moment that I always look back on when things feel hard. And also, I think one of the things about that time was we'd had a volunteer team, which at the time was all we could have. Obviously now we have a staff team and freelancers. But I felt because nothing was really happening with Magnify, effectively everyone had kind of moved on with the vision. And those are still some of my best friends still today. So it wasn't kind of hard thing. But equally, people must have been like, I can't keep plowing money and time into something that's not going anywhere. And so it was a time where, God, I was also like, I feel so lonely in this vision. And the way that he came through was just like, I just need to sit back and just give you thanks. So that's how I would encourage someone is don't look for validation. Validation doesn't mean that your vision is worth doing or not doing.
Yeah.
Ask God, what do you want for this vision? But also hold it lightly and be prepared to surrender it if need be.
Yeah. What are some of the other sacrifices, Ruth, that you've had to make? I mean, be as vulnerable as you feel, because I realise it's not a loaded question, but I realise it could be a very multi-layered question. But just with what you feel comfortable to share, what are some of the just real life sacrifices in the 15 years that you've made?
I think one of the things is friendships. Ooh. So again, starting a vision when you're 19, when your school friends or uni friends are going away for months, I'm having fundraising meetings, trying to prepare. And I feel like I had to become very serious about my work at a very young age. So like, if I look at my husband or my best friend, they have so many close friendships where they've had them for literally 15 years, 20 years. And I feel like I've always known that I could only ever really have very few friends, in part just because I did not have the capacity when, especially when you're starting a vision, you literally are doing 25 jobs. And so the idea of like a girls' night or a girls' holiday, first, if you don't have money to cover the soles of your feet, you're not going on any holiday. But yeah, I feel like friendships was a thing that I had to sacrifice in terms of having a plethora of friendships. I think also maybe discovering things that I enjoy outside of work, because I've always just been so singularly focused on the vision and the impact and women. And yeah, finances. I always think Goldman Sachs, maybe should I have been there? And sometimes my mum will still joke, like, it's not too late. I'm like, Mum, it's too late. So yeah, sometimes I think like, again, in terms of I went to like a very academic school and most of my friends are in corporate, that sometimes you do look at your life. But I would always say that you will never give God more than he can give you. And I don't mean that in like a kind of weird prosperity way. Is if I look at what Magnify has given me, the sacrifices I just can't even compare. I have the close friendships that I do have, almost every close friend I've kind of met through Magnify, the mentors I have in my life, the opportunity to use my skills, the people that we get to interview. So I remember one of the earliest interviews I did with the magazine was with Jo Malone. And for me, anyone who knows me, I love fragrances. And so the way we did the interview was to make a candle together, me and her. And when I walked home, I was like, I just made a candle with the Jo Malone. So yeah, I think, you know, interviewing Jerry Lorenzo, I admire him and what he's built so much. And so many of the people I've got to interact with as well, I would never say that I feel that I've lost out in any way.
It's amazing.
These exceptional sort of moments, Jerry Lorenzo, Joe Malone, I love Jerry Lorenzo, by the way, but even at that time, to have such a vision to go, when people might have not understood where you were going, right? And you're even saying that you have a smaller circle of people around you or relationships that are quite close-knit. Your relationship with Christ or relationship with Jesus, how do you keep that alive? Because I just sense that it's just certain things, it's only between you and God, because people won't get it, people won't understand. And just how has your relationship with him developed, you know, over the years? What are some of the things that you do with God that, you know, what we will share with us anyway, that nobody knows about? Or, just tell us about that.
So I would say, number one, my relationship with Christ is my safe space. People always find it funny that I am so emotional. I cry all the time. But I think having my relationship with Christ and being able to be fully myself, like I'm not the leader, I'm not a CEO, I'm not a pioneer, I'm not any of those things. I'm literally just Ruth. To me, I couldn't do life, talk less of running Magnify without that. And ultimately with the vision, for me, it's that my relationship with Christ has changed my life in the most incredible way. And had it not, I wouldn't even be doing this vision. So I think for me, it's just completely integral and foundational to who I am as a person. But also, I would not have... Like, sometimes I wonder how founders are even able to do this with... No, I don't mean a Christian vision, but a vision. Because sometimes I do say to friends that I almost feel that being a founder is like being insane. That you're just... It's not being very stable up there sometimes because being so passionate about something and literally thinking that you can do something that hasn't existed or trying to create a new lane, that is not, you know, often of sound mind. So I think for me, my relationship with Christ is what keeps me steady. It's what keeps me going. But it's out of that relationship with Christ and how much that's changed my life. I wouldn't even be a founder without that.
Right. Yeah. When you were talking, Ruth, about some of the things you sacrificed and that even being what you like to do out of work, like hobbies or interests, I know a big part of Magnify for you is also showing you loads of things that you're really good at. Just look at us today, right? And just all the energy you put in creatively as well to leading this vision. I guess my question is, like, through that, why is excellence so important to the vision of Magnify? Because we get it. We're part of this vision. We know it is a firm value. It's not just in front of a camera, it's at every level. Why is that so vital to you in terms of how Magnify tracks forwards as well?
And where did you get that from? That excellence? Yeah, I've always wanted to know.
My mum.
Yeah.
Because I remember even in church growing up, like when at the end of service, you'd serve people tea and coffee. And I remember there was a time when like the tea and coffee used to be very lukewarm. And I remember going with my mum to John Lewis to buy like hot water coolers. And she was like, if this is people's first experience with church where you don't know what their week has been like, let's just even do tea and coffee in such an excellent way. And then we got like sugar tongs because she was like, let's not use that wooden.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when people are serving tea, it looks cream. So I think for me, just like that was how I was raised, was to see every little detail. And I also think it's that I'm so passionate about craftsmanship and things being done well and properly. And the sense that when people come to an event or they come to the office or they come to our set, feeling like every little detail. So if women can't see this, but it's what happens when you come here, we'll give the women like hotel slippers. And to me, it's just, I've thought of everything like, okay, you've probably come on the tube, it's hot, you're probably sweaty. How can I just feel relaxed? Not everyone is like used to having hair and makeup and coming to tell like their life's most vulnerable story. So for me, excellence is just a core value in, I mean, the team will even know, even down to like the fonts that we send emails. I'm like, guys, everything just needs to be done properly. Because I also think that this vision, I will always say, as much as I'm grateful that so many Christian women love what we do, my heart has always been for women who would probably not call themselves Christians, who are on a journey wanting to explore. And ultimately, if people don't know that Christ is amazing, things looking rubbish, they're unlikely to stop because they don't know that that's even important. So for me, excellence has been foundational because of the women that I'm so desperate for us to reach. But yeah, I just also feel like I've been gifted in that way where I do notice like every single creative detail. And yeah, I feel it's an honour to have been able to work with so many amazing creatives over the last few years.
It's part of using your gift, isn't it? And that creative expression, I think, sometimes is seen as not as important as other things. But I know, and we know as being part of this team, it's actually to reflect a creative God and an excellent God. And actually that helps, like you said, Ruth, that actually helps people to see something more. That it's not just a nice set, it's not just nice clothes, it's actually expressing who God is. And it creates a kind of a gateway for people as well, who sometimes just share our interests and our passions to hear something more, something deeper. You know, we make jokes. There's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of brain rot out there. We're actually having meaningful conversations, but it's even more than the conversations. It's the community that you've built, Ruth, and that continues to grow as well.
And the community is so important to me. So one thing I've always been passionate about, and probably because I was raised where I was often the only Black girl, is having a community that reflects women of all different races and backgrounds. And that hasn't been an easy thing, because Rachel will know, because she's on a lot of the calls, that often when people see me, they just automatically assume that I've created something for only women like me. And there's absolutely no problem with platforms that are like that. But I think for me, Magnify, that has been so ingrained in how I see what I'm called to, is it for it to be a community that brings women from so many different walks of life. And that's what I always love, when women who probably in normal life would never meet each other become friends, or they get to see faith expressed in women who are maybe so different to what their church or cultural experience has been like. That for me is a really important part of the community.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned gateways and ways to draw other people in, and how your passion is not just for women like you, but and not just Christian women, for different women. And Magnify I see as a gateway, uses so many gateways for people to have an experience. I remember the first time Ruth came to my church, and my mum was in fashion. My mum did fashion journalism, and she was so passionate about Magnify because of the fashion. And I thought, if you didn't use that gateway, would I have even met you? Would our church even have heard about this magazine? And again, it was something no one had heard of. I remember the congregation thinking, oh my gosh, like you could see there, but my mum was all for it in the front. So no one could tell her anything. Like, she's like, there's a lady, she's gonna take over the service. She's gonna talk about her magazine. And we were just like, okay, but I love that vision that you use some things people think are natural, fashion, the stories of women, to draw people in. And what other things are you sort of imagining? What is the ultimate goal? What other gateways are you thinking of or dreaming of that you want to use to go forward with this vision?
So I think for me, I always say like community and like having physical spaces around the world that we can bring communities to. And again, the way I am wired is that I see like cities of influence. So probably I wouldn't go to like a rural town to set up like a Magnify house. But for me, having Magnify house in those like key locations, whether it's London or LA or Lagos or Accra or Cape Town, is something for me that it's a big, big vision that will be millions, but I really believe that God can do it. And content, like I don't just see the Magnify conversations as our only thing. I have 700 million ideas of different streams of content. And I think, the idea of building something that also elevates so many women. So I love it when people will always like comment and be like, Sinead or Rachel, they're like completely walking in their gift in this vision. And for me, I see that as such an honour, where I kind of feel like I want to be like a conductor behind the scenes in terms of, I know that I've been gifted to lead this vision, but I've never been interested in it being Ruth Afolabi Ministries. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, the idea of seeing women find their gift in this vision, be elevated, have their stories told, be given a platform, is something that I feel honoured that we've been able to do. And so I see that just like multiplying across the world.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. My name's Rachel.
And my name's Sinead. And we'll be your hosts for these episodes as we're joined by incredible women from the Magnify community to chat through their lived journeys and experiences across money, relationships, and work, all from the perspective of their relationship with God.
We know so many of you already watch these conversations, so if you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, hit the button now. It really helps this important content to reach even more women around the world and ensures we keep bringing these conversations to you.
We hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get into it. You said that one of your visions was to elevate other women and give them a platform, and honestly, this is an answered prayer for me, because I wrote down like in a journal, I want to work for Magnify. And I think I got an email a week later that you're looking for writers, and I can't spell. I know I'm a lawyer, but I can't spell. So I thought, this is your opportunity. Like, you ask God for something, take the opportunity. And then I wrote my first article for Magnify. And it was like, honestly, it's almost like my dreams came true in that moment. And to sit here with you now and hear that that's a vision that God gave you, and I get to be a part of that, is just, I can't find the words that how grateful I am that you were obedient, that you had the courage, the faith to do that. And, vision, it gets given to one person. That's what my dad said, that it gets given to one person, but God brings other people alongside of you to make that come to pass. But only the visionary will see sometimes where we're going. And, I'm sure there's women like me all over the place that feel they don't fit in, or you know, they've grown up in church and they want to bring their faith to the forefront somehow, Magnify gives them that evidence, you know, that my faith is useful somewhere. My faith can be expressed somewhere. Or I don't know anything about faith, but I love fashion. And I think it's just a thank you before I ask a question, just that, you know, you when you're obedient to God, other people's prayers get answered. When you're obedient to God, other people's prayers get answered. And this is an answered prayer for me. So I'm very grateful for that, you know. But being in this Western world where Christianity can be mocked and people might, you know, put Christianity in a box or think the views are traditional, what keeps you just so strong on the vision that this is still a Christian magazine and this is to empower women of faith or not of faith? What keeps you on that path?
I think in a way, ever since I was younger, I've always been like an old person in a child's body. In the sense that even at school, I was never like easily influenced by people or like what people were thinking. Partly in school, I was just like, we all don't know anything, so I'm not going to have you tell me that you're right. But I think just that strong-headedness in a good way has meant that, you know, even there was a time where with Magnify, people like, you're just too traditional, like you need to be more with the times. And I guess because we look fashionable or modern, people expect that at least in my theology as the founder, that I'm very much of like the 2024 world. That's all I'll say. And so I think for me, I've just always been very strong on being obedient to what God has called me to be as a person, being obedient to what this vision I feel God has called it to be. And I've always been aware that God doesn't need me. So if he's asked me to be obedient and to be faithful to his word, if I don't want to do that, that's fine. I'll find somebody else. And so I've always held that this is God's vision that he's entrusted me with. Is not for me to now be like, you know what, actually we're moving with what everyone else is doing. So yeah, that probably sounds like a very straightforward answer, but I think it's been in my mentality. And I think a side thing, because people always know I love football, is that being someone who's loved sports and also loved the stories of athletes, I've always admired and appreciated people who are very single-minded. Like one of my absolute heroes growing up was Kobe Bryant. And when you listen to interviews with him, you could not tell him anything, like no matter what you thought in terms of how he should be as a teammate, how he should be as a basketball player. And so I think partly my love of like sports and the way I'm so interested in the stories of those who've been outliers has always kind of informed my approach, that because you're doing something that's different to other people or people might not understand what you're doing, that doesn't make you wrong. Sometimes it's just that people don't see, as you say, the vision that you've been given. And ultimately remembering that God has given me this vision. It's not for Joe Bloggs. If Joe Bloggs doesn't understand what I'm doing, may God bless him, but he's not the one who's called me.
Yeah, and you were alluding to it earlier, Ruth, about like at the end of the day, this is a vision that God's given. You're stewarding it. He has asked you to steward it, but this is far bigger than you, right? And it's far bigger than, and that's your mentality as well. It's far bigger, hopefully, even just than the women we serve now and this generation is something that has to live on. But in the meantime, this requires like good visionary leadership, but also you following Jesus, right? So this can be, I think for a lot of founders who are Christian CEOs, who are kind of charting their way forwards, you want to operate with love and forgiveness and mercy, but also you've got to make decisions. Sometimes they can seem harsh or firm, but that's part of your responsibility as a founder, because you also become a protector and a defender of what God's asked you to do, even more than pleasing everyone. I don't know if I should ask you, do you have any stories about that? Do you have any stories, examples of that? Maybe not. I don't know if that's for now. Or just can you speak to that a little bit?
I think it's, incredibly hard. And I think also the other dimension is being a woman. Naturally, we are very compassionate. And I think sometimes that's where I've made mistakes, is actually taking too long to make decisions because I'm so worried about people's feelings. And I think with Magnify, also the added complication is that when you work with people, often they have started working because they're a fan of the brand. And so if, say, someone is a photographer, but they're not good at, well, they're not necessarily of the standards that I would appreciate from Vision, that can be hard because they've come into the Vision because they're like, this has impacted me so much.
Right.
And then you have to be like, and for us to go to the next level,
right.
things will need to change. So I think, that's where I've learned in leadership that I need to get much better is a leader has to make hard decisions. And I think naturally as people, we want to be loved or appreciated by other people. And sometimes when you make tough decisions, you're unlikely to, especially those who feel the consequences of those hard decisions in the moment, at least, are unlikely to be, see your decision-making in a positive light. So I think, maybe I won't share too many specific stories, but I would say that that's what I found really hard. And I think an area of leadership that I need to definitely grow in.
But when you've made those hard decisions, how have you handled maybe the anxiety on the back of it in terms of, because we know you well, like it's not that you want to please people, but you want to give people your best. Like this is so much more than a professional organisation. We're not climbing over each other's heads. Like this is a community. So obviously we want people to know, actually we love you, but also there's a commitment to excellence, growth, and just things changing. How have you handled your own anxiety when you've had to make a hard decision?
I really procrastinate. It's not a good thing.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that when I then make those hard decisions, the biggest feeling and repetitive feeling is one of relief. And I'm like, why did I not do this earlier? And so I think that's, an area where I want to get better at is making important decisions. I don't mean quickly, but in a timely manner, because actually the anxiety just builds up the longer you don't make them.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
But I think it's so balanced by what you said about, but we're committed to this community. So it balances out because the reason you're doing it is not for yourself, it's because you have a community of women that you want to elevate and you want to grow and you want to see them grow. So it's not even, a selfishly motivated reason.
I think it's obedience to what God said and the vision he's given you. And I think that's sometimes why perhaps as founders, you can feel that you worry about the people side because you love people. This is kind of why you're doing it. But even above that is that obedience to God and the vision he's given. You still love those people, but it sometimes just means you've got to make a hard decision. It's not easy.
And I think though with Magnify, what has got easier, not many things have got easier, but this has got easier, is that I think people see the commitment to excellence. And like someone asked the other day, what is it that makes you want to work with people? And for me, I would always say it's a personal desire to want to grow and develop in your gifts. Like I cannot give that to you. And I've realised that those are the people that I work best with. I think, I now understand myself that if you're someone that is not committed to your own personal growth and development, I will love you from a distance, but maybe not within the four walls of the vision.
The 3 F's of Magnify. 1 is feminism. Ooh, we're about to split the crowd. Feminism, especially now, has such a positive or an adverse reaction to many people because obviously the different types of feminism, there's all kinds going on. Sometimes in Christian circles that can be a real block or a put off because perhaps they believe Magnify is trying to do something that is adverse to the gospel. But Ruth, I guess in your words and for us, how would you define how we see feminism? What do we mean by that?
So I think feminism for me, I would say, is seeing women as equal to men, but also recognising that we're different. And for me, just a real commitment to uplifting women and their stories. And the funny thing, how you said that like in Christian circles, the feminism, I feel that in many different circles, any of the Fs, people are just like... So particularly in Christian circles, when you say feminism and fashion, with the fashion, people are always like, well, I just couldn't be as trendy as Magnify. And I'm like, the trendy doesn't sound like a compliment, but it's fine. So again, I think it's just one of those things where I've got very comfortable in trying to explain how we see it and being very clear, this is our definition. If people understand that, that is amazing. If they don't, that's also fantastic as well. But I remember it was probably like 10 years ago, I was walking to Sainsbury's and I was like, God, I just need a way of like encapsulating what this vision is and the 3 Fs that she just dropped into my spirit then. So I'd always say the faith is the absolute foundation of what we do. The vision is focused on women, and fashion and creativity is the way we express the vision. So to me, in my mind anyway, the 3 Fs just go seamlessly together in terms of explaining what we do and why we do it.
Yeah, and it's not a push against.
Yeah.
It's not a push against anything. I think it's important to make a statement through those things. I think sometimes where it can get difficult, like I say, it's not just Christian circles, it's any circles, is if people think you're trying to be at one end of the spectrum of anything. But it's like you said, for us, it's very much just seeing women as different to men, but as equal. And the way a lot of the women we serve in our community, they sometimes feel they just don't fit for some reason, right?
I think, if anything, women who feel like they don't fit, I'm like, yep, you found your people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of what this vision, this community attracts, is different, multifaceted women. I want to say they don't fit. It's not a boo-hoo, like not going through their lives feeling down about it, but just needing a place to feel like, these people get me.
Right.
You were saying before, Sinead, about the people that you've met through. One of the greatest gifts of Magnify for me, even before I've been part of this team, has been the people that I've got to encounter and some of the friendships that I've made. I feel rich because of it.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful just to the doors that's opened.
Yeah.
And that's the same for many women in our community.
And the stories of those women, they're women's stories, but they're not just feminist stories. They're stories of people's lives that anyone can glean from. People can take so much from the stories of these women, but so often history tells the stories of men. So it's amazing that we have the opportunity to hear the detail, which men often don't give much detail in their storytelling, or the hardship, or the perspective as well, that as a woman, this is how I did it. And that's okay to say, this is a different perspective, but it still underpins the 3 Fs, right? It's still how I use my faith, how I use the fact that I was a woman. I can't change that. And then, and I'm stylish, and I like, it just softens the blow that actually I literally can take over the world, but I remember that it's faith that brought me to this place.
Yeah.
And I think that's where obedience again comes in, is there was a time where, probably actually part of the podcast when we first started, is I kind of took away the fashion, because I was like, we just need to try to appeal to everyone, and we don't want that to be a barrier. And then when we released it, I was like, no, we need to put that back. And I realised, again, that God has not necessarily called Magnify to reach every single woman on the face of planet Earth, but the women he's called me to. And I also think, as a founder, particularly speaking from the perspective of my faith, God has wired me in a certain way to lead this vision. So my love of fashion, even I would say my love of football, somehow you'll start to see it in the future. We might add another F. That is weaved into the fabric. Even when you asked about where did my love of excellence come from, that is part of my story and the way I've been raised and my passions. I see that through the fabric of this vision.
I would love to know what kind of stories you want to tell next, because I keep hearing sport. I don't know whether we're going to have like a football team, which I will not be part of. But but I just love how you're saying that a lot of athletes, which I really love reading biographies. That's what I spend most of my childhood doing. Have this mindset, and I'm just wondering what other types of stories do you still want to hear more of, or you're thinking about?
I love to hear from outliers and pioneers. And I think it's just, again, how I'm wired, is people who have done things out of the ordinary, who have created things, who've influenced, and I know this is not everyone's calling, but for me, people who've influenced things at a very central point. So whether it's you're the CEO of a company, or you're an athlete that everyone knows, or you're a designer whose brand is all around the world, for me, that is like a different type of story that I feel we haven't necessarily told. Just because I think seeing the part that faith plays in many of the people that we're more familiar with, I would love to, kind of what we do with the print magazine, is I would love to kind of keep telling those stories. And also just, I think that's why I've loved the conversations though as well, is having the balance of then those literal everyday stories, where the thing I love is that in this chair could be any of us, any woman that we know, any of our friends. And I feel that's what also makes the conversations very relatable, is feeling that I identify with these women, whether it's their jobs or their personalities or just what they've been through. But yeah, I would love to continue to tell those other type of stories as well.
Ruth, people are so used to seeing myself and Sinead on these chairs.
And they love it, I know.
Yes. But obviously you are the CEO and you're the founder of Magnify, and you're at the core of lots of things, but perhaps just on Instagram, on YouTube, we don't see much of you. Like, has that been an intentional choice? Many founders are very visible at the front, and I know for you, people are sometimes asking you, do you work for Magnify? It's like, I mean...
Just a little.
Yeah. Has that been an intentional choice for you? Do you think it's important for founders to be visible? What are your thoughts on that?
I think in both ways. So obviously in the last 4 years, I've pretty much been pregnant every calendar year. And I'm just one of these people that I don't like to be seen when I'm pregnant. So that was part of it. But I think also what I said about wanting to elevate other women, I think if there are areas where I feel like I need to speak or I would love to be present, but I've never been a founder that just wants to be at the forefront for the sake of it. So some people might not know, the way we started the podcast initially was Rachel and I were actually hosting. And I remember just sitting there thinking, I am not enjoying this at all.
You did a good job.
But I was literally just thinking of like 1,000,001 things, like
You could be doing.
fundraising, like I need to email this person back, like just what's our 5-year strategy? And you could put, my eyes just looked like I was completely glazed over. And so for me, I was like, yeah, this is just not my area of gifting. And what happened in that particular episode was there was a lot of noise and I just had a headache. So I was like, can I sit out? And then I saw Rachel hosting and I was like, she's so gifted, but also she's enjoying this. What am I doing? So I think, for me, as the vision, I always say, like, I would love my daughter's generation to get to enjoy and have Magnify around. So Magnify is not my personal property. So I've never felt the need that, like, I have to be front and centre. And again, wanting this to be a vision that invites women from so many different backgrounds, I've always been keen that who God has called to be alongside me, I would also love them to be involved and to be front-facing. Right. Probably in the future, I think there are areas where I will be more visible, but I think as a founder, it's important, particularly as a vision grows. So not when, at the beginning, I was visible because it was literally just me. When you're just a team of one, if you don't want to be visible, then nobody knows about you. But I think, it's just been a different season over the last few years. I don't know that this will always be the case, but I know definitely when it comes to things like hosting, that is not an area that I feel super passionate about because I like to do things that I'm good at. And I know that thinking of the 5-year strategy when you're asking people their deep life stories does not make sense.
And you have an insane ability actually to identify people's fit and gift and bring them together. That's a big part of your strength as a CEO, as a founder, and actually what brings not only the diversity to Magnify, but the depth and what we can actually do. So I think that's incredible. Sometimes you've got to know what your gift is and just go with it.
Yeah. And even like with you guys, people don't know the story, but obviously Rachel was hosting it. I still to this day do not know how you did that alone. And then I was just like, actually, I remember seeing them interact. Yeah. And I was like, also a lot of their stories in terms of just a lot of how you've been raised, how you see the world. I was like, they would be really good together. And I think, again, that's something that I enjoy is I kind of now have made a term for it in terms of like business matchmaking. I love like putting people together, identifying people's gifts. And that's something that I love about this vision.
And when we think about mission and purpose, very often people say a way that you find that is what keeps you up at night. Or what makes you really angry, right? Or what keeps you up at night is how you figure out what's the most, or one of the most important things, maybe not the most important thing. So Ruth, I'm just dying to know, what keeps you up at night?
Besides a newborn.
Besides the obvious answer.
I think for me, it's just how does Magnify have the resource to make the impact that I believe we've been called to be? Like when people see the flowers, the chairs, the lights, the crew behind the camera. That is not for free. We're no longer in, 2009 when the vision started, where we were just using, ourselves as students who were learning to hold a camera for the first time. It's a bit more established than that now. Yeah. So I think what keeps me up at night is, God, I know that there are people that you've gifted with wealth and with the insight to understand what we're doing. How do you connect us with those people? And for anyone who's had to do fundraising, you know how challenging it is. So yeah, I would say that that's the biggest thing, is not just where we've got to in the last 15 years, but how do we have the resource to get to the next 15 years with 10 times the number of impacts? Because I always say, because this is a vision, we are not profit-driven in any way. It's about how can we impact women's lives, how can we change women's lives, how can we see women thrive with Christ at the centre. Getting out to the millions of women that I know need to hear this message is not something that we can do with £0. So yeah, that keeps me up at night, but because it's such a big thing, I'm like, God, only you can handle this.
Yeah. And I'm excited that you called out millions of women, because I think it's important that the community know where we're going. So people sometimes say a few or this is, but I want the community to know and understand this is worldwide, okay? Like this is millions of people that we're reaching out to right now and continuing to grow. And so, yeah, I'm just really excited for the next 15 years where we will take us. And yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for being obedient. Yeah. Thank you for being a visionary and for loving fashion as much as you do. I just would leave it to you to close out with our community and just, share what you have coming up for us and where you can find us. Yeah, please.
So yeah, Magnify Collective or Magnify Collective on socials. We're called Magnify, by the way. I just thought I would add that in. But sadly, that name and domain has been taken for years. So for us, I think the next stage is just how do we continue to build community, but global communities of women across the world. Every day, guys, we see the emails, we see the DMs, when a Magnify event's coming. So, if you want to give us Magnify House 2.0, then that would be fine. And you'll see much more regular events. But yeah, I think for me, it's kind of bringing it to life again. And also bringing back something in print is just, for me, so key, because like a friend was in like a coffee shop of a commercial agent the other day and they saw Magnify and they were like, Magnify's actually in like normal places. I'm like, yes. It is. And so for me, like one of the proudest moments is seeing Magnify in Selfridges. And again, when I talk about impact and being accessible to women who are maybe not familiar with Christianity, that's why print is so important to me. So yeah, for our community, it's the three things of continuing to create more content, but bringing that to life and also bringing that in physical form.
Ruth, thank you so much. Thanks for your openness, honesty, stories and laughs as always. It's so good. And like Sinead said, just to echo, I think from me, on behalf of our community, thank you so much for your obedience, your faithfulness, and we're praying for you as well as you continue. We're with you, but we're praying for you as you continue to move forwards. And I know we'll look back on this and have many stories to tell of what God's done in the next 15 years. Amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you for joining us for today's conversation. We hope you gleaned as much from it as we did.
You can join us to cultivate wisdom, be inspired, and gain knowledge on how to put your best foot forward in your career, money, and relationships, all grounded in faith as we grow together.
If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel to keep up to date with all of our episodes at the Magnify Conversations.
If you have a story to share and would like to be featured on the conversations, get in touch with Team Magnify through magnifycollective.com and head to our contact form.
We'll see you soon for another installment. From all of our team and crew, have a great week.